Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So happy to have some time with you today. It's Friday, in case you needed that reminder. We've had an amazing week at YWTV this week. For those of you who didn't keep up, go and watch the episodes. We had Senator Cory Booker with us yesterday and had a wonderful conversation about systemic racism and the work that he's doing. Um, in Washington, D.C. on our behalf, and the intersectionality of how it's impacting Black women in our state. I really encourage you to go watch that conversation. We also had a great conversation with Assemblywoman Valerie Veneri Huddle and the advocacy leader at AARP talking about caregiver support and Paid Leave Act. That was on Wednesday. And Tuesday, we got to speak to Paula Madison from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. She's participating in our Share the Mic Now campaign that we've been doing at the YWCA. And we talked all about all the great work that she and the coalition are doing. So lots of great episodes to watch, but I get to end the week on a high point. I'm spending some time with Johanna Calle today. And thank you so much, Johanna, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For those of you that don't know Johanna, Johanna is a senior policy advisor at the Office for New Americans at the New Jersey Department of Human Services. And she's going to share some insights on policies that are being identified and developed under her watch to advance efforts and welcome and empower immigrant communities in our state. Prior to joining the department, Johanna served as a director of the New Jersey Alliance for Immigration Justice, where she played key roles in passing legislation to expand access to driver's licenses to all, and with the implementation of Attorney General Graywall's Immigrant Trust Directive. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Political Science from the College of New Jersey and a Master's in Criminal Justice from Rutgers University. So what's really interesting about Johanna, well, there's a lot of really interesting things about Johanna, let me say, but one of the things that's really interesting about her is that she was born in Ecuador. She was raised in Hackensack, and she is formally an undocumented student with undocumented family members. So this work that she's doing is very personal for her, and she has an empathy from her own life experience. She started her advocacy as a high school student, urging Congress to pass the DREAM Act, and she made several visits to Washington, D.C. In support of comprehensive immigration reform. And in her off time, you wouldn't imagine that she'd have any, but she makes time to mentor immigrant students and their families to navigate their path on higher education, which is such a conversation for us to have today as well. So there's so many important areas to discuss. So let's jump right into it, Johanna. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about, what are some of the issues that many immigrants and refugees are currently dealing with today?
Yeah, so what I thought was would be really helpful is for us to talk about a little background information on the immigrant communities here in New Jersey, because I think when we think about immigration and immigrant communities, we often think of states like New York and California and Texas and Arizona. We don't necessarily think of New Jersey as a state of immigrants, but we actually are. So for context, we actually have the third largest foreign-born population by percentage in the nation, the third largest. And we also have the fifth largest percentage of undocumented people in the nation. And so when we think about immigrant communities and the immigrant population and refugee population, we actually have some of the largest ones. And Bergen County actually surprisingly has a really big immigrant community, which is, I landed here with my family in Hackensack, New Jersey, and I'm still here in Hackensack. And so it's important for us to think about how diverse and how large our communities are. Another thing that I thought was just interesting, because when we think about and we talk about serving, working with, supporting immigrant and refugee communities, we think of Spanish-speaking immigrants, because that's usually what we see in the media. It's usually what we see in the news. But the fact is New Jersey is quite diverse. So beyond Spanish, you have Filipino, Tagalog, Chinese, Hindi, Korean, Gujarati, Portuguese, or Arabic, Polish, Russian. I mean, these are how many languages are being spoken at home other than English. And Bergen County is one of those counties, and North Jersey really is quite diverse. And so I wanted to make sure that we all sort of ground ourselves in that information about our communities, and then think about the fact that many of them are living in mixed statuses, which is the other part of the diversity. Some immigrants are US citizens, naturalized US citizens. I am a naturalized US citizen. I was able to naturalize in 2012. But some are undocumented, which means that they have not been able to adjust their status. Some of them are green card holders, which means that they have permanent residency just to be here, but they're not citizens, so they can't vote. And then you have a bunch of other statuses in between. You have refugees, you have TPS, you have DACA recipients. And so when we think about our immigrant communities, they're that diverse. And so the issues that they face are actually very much connected to that diversity. And so when we think about what's going on at the national level, the immigration system really needs fixing. For a long time, it's been a bit of a mixed mash of policies. And now we have this issue where the immigration system is broken. It needs to be fixed. And there's a lot of work to do because you have millions of immigrants that are contributing to our economy, to our workforce, to our community, to our culture. And unfortunately, because of some of the statuses and some of the fear and the policies, there's just a lot of fear, right? And so many of them are going to be afraid to approach services, to get help, they're going to work, they're going to school. But I mean, when I was undocumented, I was very fearful of even telling anyone that I was undocumented. And for context, right, like they're living here, they're working with our communities and a part of who we are. I wanted to sort of share in state and local taxes, you're looking at about $604 million that are paid for just by undocumented folks. That doesn't even count your green card holders and everyone else. $1.1 billion in federal taxes. Like that's how much is being just in money, right? Like that's not even the other social contributions of the community. So in terms of what we're dealing with right now, because we have a pandemic.
Yes.
COVID.
But I was thinking about in the
yeah. What are we facing?
So many of them are essential workers, and we wouldn't really be getting through this time without them.
And that's exactly where I think a lot of the issues that immigrant communities are dealing with are now being exacerbated, as we see with many other communities, are exacerbated through COVID, right? So you're talking about health insurance. Many folks do not have access to health insurance. There's also an issue with them being essential workers and also being afraid of accessing services because of what's going on with their own statuses. Reporting crimes, which is another issue, which, it's sort of part of the long-term issue, but also it means that under COVID, if they are being exploited, if something's not being done right, they're probably less likely to report that. And then on top of that is that the federal government, there have been certain policies that have been put in forth to aid communities through COVID, and yet immigrant communities are being left out. So for instance, everyone got that stimulus check that happened couple months back. Basically what the laws were saying was that undocumented folks couldn't get any of that. And even mixed status folks. So if you were married to a US citizen, but you were undocumented, that automatically kicked you off being able to get any of that aid. And so that is where, imagine what's going on with many of us who are dealing with COVID, and then, add another layer, right, of that immigration status.
So obviously there's a lot that can, on the national level, we see a lot in the news and a lot of conversation. What are some permanent solutions, on the national level? And what are some issues on the national level that we should be attuned to right now around immigration issues?
Yeah, so, immigration is one of those issues that we've seen a lot of policies and announcements and news constantly. Every week, every couple of weeks, we see a brand new announcement that's been going on. Right now, I think things to highlight is the Trump administration announced that they were going to require changes for international students, and basically ICE, which is the office that does immigration enforcement, basically announced that they were going to require that international students be in person at school. And if they were not going to be in person, then they were going to be deported. This really caused a lot of issues with higher ed institutions. And what happened was you had many colleges, universities, and attorney generals who actually joined a lawsuit against that. Attorney General Grewal joined it as well, basically stating that this was going to impact our communities, that this was an undue burden that you were going to put on international students, which are also a part of these communities. And so I think shortly after, I think we probably heard this Tuesday or Wednesday, that now the administration has decided to backtrack on that decision and decided to change that guidance, which is, a big win for higher ed institutions and obviously for those students who have been getting their education here for a long time. So that's sort of the I think the one of the latest announcements that we've seen. The other is that you obviously, like I mentioned before, the immigration system needs fixing, and so you have a couple folks communities that are living in limbo. That's your DACA recipients, temporary protective status. Those are folks who basically have been given the ability to be in the country for a short period. They give you basically a couple year permits to be here. You get to apply for renewal every 2 years. TPS, which is temporary protective status, basically covers folks from countries that have seen hardship. So you're looking at Haiti, for instance, where they had the earthquake, or you're looking at El Salvador or Honduras, where they have had histories of war and disasters. And so what the U.S. did is, hey, you need somewhere to be. You can be here. We're giving you humanitarian protection. That's temporary protective status. Many folks who've had TPS have been here for 20 years, but they're still not green card holders and they're still not citizens. They're just in this weird
limbo,
couple year at a time limbo place. And that's actually very similar to what DACA is. And so there have been a lot of there have been calls for permanent solutions, asking for Congress to really fix it through congressional action, which would be legislation at Congress level.
So you mentioned DACA, and which of course is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. What's happening with DACA right now?
So the Supreme Court made a decision that basically said that the Trump administration does not have the right to end the program the way that they try to end it. And I'm saying that very specifically because that left the window open for the Trump administration to reconsider or revisit ending the program in a different way. What that also meant, though, and the decision basically said that the program had to go back to its inception back in 2012. So just for a little bit of history, is they announced the program in 2012, and then the Trump administration continued to make changes to the program and how it was implemented. So you used to be able to apply if you had arrived to this country at a certain age, if you had been in the country for a certain time. And then they changed it to where you can only do renewals. You couldn't do new applications. And this was because of the litigation. The Supreme Court decision basically says, no, you have to go back and implement the program the way it was in inception, meaning new applications would have to be accepted. The Department of Homeland Security, based on the decision from the Supreme Court, they had to start accepting or announced how they were going to start accepting new applications, basically, I believe on Monday, this past Monday. They have not done that. And so right now, folks are basically waiting for the Department of Homeland Security to announce how are they going to do this and for them to comply with the decision of the Supreme Court. Our governor and commissioner as well mentioned that they were asking for, we did a statement in support of the decision and also have been urging the federal government to open up that process.
Well, we'll be eagerly awaiting to see when that happens with everybody else for sure.
And we have to keep an eye on what the Trump administration decides, right? I think shortly after the Supreme Court decision came out, they had already announced that they were going to try and potentially end the program again.
Right. So that leads us to, I guess my next question is, how can we help immigrant communities? How can we help support them? What are some of the resources that we have available for them? And, those of us who want to be allies, how can we support?
So I think we have to keep in mind the challenges that immigrants are facing. A couple of things I wanted to mention also about what's going on at the national level is that it's not just DACA recipients and international students, right? TPS, as I mentioned, also refugee and asylum seekers are also under attack. Unfortunately, things have been made harder to seek asylum in the U.S. The Trump administration also has been putting a proposal that would make it harder for asylum seekers to get work authorizations, which then means that they can't have the legal permission to work while they're waiting for their cases to be accepted, which is also an issue, right? So I think we have to keep in mind that there are constraints because of federal law. But there's also things we can do. At the state level, our attorney general has joined the lawsuits when they were fighting to protect DACA. as I mentioned about the international students, the Murphy administration, since Governor Murphy has come on, as you mentioned in my intro as well, though, we've had financial aid for all, including undocumented students, driver's licenses for all, which passed, minimum wage for all, paid sick leave. All these things also impact immigrant communities, and the Murphy administration actually decided to take the refugee resettlement program back into the wing of the state, which used to not happen. And I know obviously right now we're seeing a lot of targeting of refugees and immigrants with the travel ban and all these other things that have been going on nationally. It really was important for the administration that we take that back and that we make New Jersey a state that is welcoming for all, especially given the size of our community. And then in terms of resources for how do we help folks day to day, right? And thinking through how do we help them. We actually have programs. We created a one pager out of the Office of New Americans that basically outlines the different programs that are available to immigrants regardless of status. Those different communities that I mentioned, right? TPS, DACA, status, no status, green card holders. Unfortunately, you end up with situations where immigrant communities are afraid of applying for programs that are open to them just because they think that they're not open to them. And also, we often think citizen, non-citizen, and then don't think about all those different statuses in between.
Right.
And so that one pager outlines your worker support program and your additional help for those who are seeking.
Is that available on your website?
Yes, it is.
So
yes.
We'll link, just for our viewers to know, we'll link that page to the comments here. So if you want to share that with anyone in your life that you think it would be helpful for, or if anyone watching, it would be useful for them. Thank you. That's great.
Yes, absolutely. And I think folks, as I said, I think it's about not being afraid to ask and look into these programs. Don't assume just because you don't have a citizenship, you don't apply for something, right? We're better off asking those questions.
You're, hearing about the fear, it's also making me think about the census.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So can we, for anyone watching maybe who's feeling fearful about completing the census, what are some words for them?
Well, the census is completely safe. I know there was a lot of back and forth on whether immigration status or immigration information was going to be collected out of the census. That is not in the census. So for folks to be safe, that they can do that. It's important for us to be counted. It's important for everyone to be counted. Resources across the board are basically allocated based on those numbers, and it's only done every 10 years. And so, the way I've sort of been thinking about it is we have this worldwide pandemic that we haven't seen in hundreds and hundreds of years. And then the impact of this could be even harder if we don't have the census data to back what the community looks like in terms of our demographics and where we live. And then we're going to have to wait 10 years to potentially have to fix that again, right? Yeah. So it's important for folks to participate.
So we'll also, we'll include another, we're always pushing an opportunity for people to fill out the census. So we'll also include a link in our comments so that if anyone's feeling more comfortable now to complete the census, that they can do that. So Johanna, before we wrap up, just a thought, as someone who's, lived this experience, lived with this fear, if anyone is watching or anyone has someone they're connected to in their life that's living this experience, what are some words of advice that you can give them to, help them through this, these anxieties in this time?
Yeah. Unfortunately we're living through unprecedented times, and it's nearly impossible to change what was going on right now. Like, there's a lot out of our own control. But I think it's really what always makes me feel a little better is knowing that our immigrant communities have always been resilient, right? We traveled from our home countries. We've come to something completely new, to communities and cities that we don't know, with languages that we don't understand. And even through all those challenges, immigrants and refugees have been able to thrive and succeed and make it through every day. And we still feed our families, and we still, try and reach that American dream that we all try to reach. And so I always feel it makes me feel a little better knowing that that's what our community is. Our community is resilient. And so we make it through hard times all the time. That's what we come from, that. And we always will do better. And so I think it's about that. The other thing is really seeking for help and really connecting to the resources that are available, because there's just a lot of resources that are available, and it's important for us to not be so siloed, especially right now, where folks are afraid of getting tested, folks are afraid of getting medical care. We don't want lives to be lost because we didn't get tested and because we're afraid. We want to make sure that that's the case. So actually, I almost forgot to mention, we also have a one-pager that outlines COVID testing for undocumented and uninsured folks to make sure, which is helpful. And also, I mentioned the resources. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention before I forget is Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which is by the Department of Community Affairs. The deadline is today at 5:00.
Yep.
And so if folks are seeking help for that, they should also look into that. The last thing I wanted to, well, there are two tiny things. Pandemic EBT, which folks should have hopefully start receiving their cards this week, but they can look for information. We also have a link for that. And then public charge, which is something that we sort of skipped a little, which is that the federal government also has changed how public charge is implemented. And public charge basically means counting someone as if they are a financial burden to the country. That's basically the simplest way I could explain it. And basically the goal, I think, the result has been that folks are not reaching out to services, social services that are available to them, because they think that it's going to be used against them by the federal government when they when they try and seek adjustment of status. And so that public charge decision has been, I think, one of the major reasons why so many people are afraid. And so we actually have a one-pager that explains the public charge so that folks could get a little more information on that.
So, Johanna, while you've been talking, our fabulous Christy, who works from above, she's around us
Yes.
at all time, making the magic that makes YWTV happen, has been listing in our comments all of the pages that the resources that anyone watching needs can go to.
That's perfect.
For those of you watching, if there's someone in your life that you think could really use this information and it would be helpful, whether it's someone that they can personally use it or someone in your life you want to educate on some of these issues, please share this broadcast with them. It will remain on our Facebook page and accessible, and we'll also move it over and have it always accessible on our website and on our YouTube channel as well. Johanna, I'm so grateful for all the wonderful information you shared with us. We really packed a lot in a short period of time, but it was all very, very important and very useful. So I hope, our viewers help get the information where it's needed too. And again, for those of us that it's not directly impacting, it's a wonderful opportunity to educate yourself on these issues. And hear it from someone like Johanna, who, works in this, office, this new office that was been created, here in New Jersey, and is, administering, these important programs. And for those of you that don't know too, Johanna was the recipient of one of our Racial Justice Awards, I think last year, not last year, the year. I feel like everything's last year because I know everything's this weird bubble of like hitting pause, but we're so grateful for all the work that you do. And again, I know this comes from a personal passion for you because of your life experience, but the ripple effect of how many people you have helped in our community, and how many of us that you've educated to help us, support the community better. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
Anyone who wants to learn more, there's so many great resources that we've linked here. We have also linked the general page for you to go to, and I'm sure you could easily access Johanna and so much of her community work, there as well.
Yeah, and I would love to mention that, the work that we do at the Office of New Americans really is about building network trust and partnership. And so working with you all and working with there's so many service providers, grassroots organizations, nonprofits that are on the ground really serving the communities that they're in. And it makes such a big difference for us because ultimately that is who we're working with to continue to build those partnerships, and also working with the immigrant community and refugee communities directly to understand what issues are out there and how do we best support them. So for folks who are connected now and are interested in how do we help immigrant communities? How do we connect? It really is building those partnerships and those networks and being a part of those organizations, working with all the various different stakeholders across the state that are really seeking to support these communities.
Well, stay connected to us and we'll keep you connected to them. And we also encourage you, we'll always link, again, if there's any other organizations that Johanna sends us that thinks it's important for us to share here, we will absolutely do that. Folks, we wish you a wonderful weekend. We are so grateful that you spent some time with us today. Again, please share this broadcast with those in your life that you think would benefit from the information. We are very proud to support your efforts, Johanna, and your fight for equality and justice for all people. It absolutely is aligned with our mission and our value system, and we're grateful again for the work that you do in the community. Those of you watching, again, have a safe, wonderful weekend. I know sometimes the days all seem the same, but they're not. Join us next week on YWTV. We have a whole host of wonderful new programs for you as well. So take care. Well, thank you, Johanna.
Thank you.